wonderful to be back. Last week, we talked about some happiness enhancing techniques, including gratitude as a wonderful way to live a happy life. Today, I'm going to primarily focus on living a spiritual life as the ultimate way to joy and happiness. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen with you. Okay. So we said to be happy, we need to know who we are and what the purpose of life is. And we know that the divine religions teach us that we are, in fact, spiritual beings having a human experience. Our true identity, our real identity, is not the body that comes into being at the moment. It's basically our soul that starts this journey here on life and on earth and continues this journey throughout the realms that are going to be after this world. So the beginning of the journey is here on earth, and it continues in the countless realms of God after this life. The purpose of life, we learn from various religions, is to know God, to worship Him, to love God, to love ourselves, and to serve the human race. We are here to grow our souls, and the way to grow it, the water that is needed for the growth of our soul, is contemplation, prayer, and meditation. Last week, I talked about the contemplation practice in the morning and evening contemplation and daily accountability. Today, I'm going to move on to the love of God and focus a lot on love altogether. And love of God is basically the underlying purpose for our creation. Here is a beautiful quote from the words of Baha'u'llah in the Hidden Words, where he says, "O Son of Man, veiled in my immemorial being and in the ancient eternity of my essence, I knew my love for thee. Therefore I created thee, have engraved on thee mine image, and revealed to thee my beauty." But how do we nurture the love of God? We know that the seed of the love of God is within our souls. But how do we go about nurturing that seed? There are some suggestions. Persistent prayers to be guided to His path. Contemplation of His words, living a life that is centered on God. Praying for steadfastness and resignation to God's will. Associating with spiritual people, and engaging in charitable deeds and service to humanity. So nurturing the love of God in our hearts leads to hope for a better future, peace of mind, and true and lasting happiness. Now, if our heart is devoid of the love of God, it has to be filled with something. So it could be filled with material things that will not really give us lasting happiness, or maybe negative feelings such as worry, fear, hatred, envy. To give you some examples: anger, regret, greed, and sorrow. And to flee from all of those feelings, some people resort to alcohol and drugs, of course. When we talk about love, we can also talk about self-love. But how do we cultivate that love? One way to do this, the most important of it all, of course, is contemplation of God's words, which basically will help us understand who we really are. So give us an insight into our inherent value as God's noblest creation, His noblest creation in potential. Here's another quote from the words of Baha'u'llah. "O Son of Being, thou art my lamp and my light is in thee," he says. "Get thou from it thy radiance and seek none other than me, for I have created thee rich and have bountifully shed my favor upon thee." We can also cultivate self-love by practicing what we do well and drawing strength and confidence from our success, and paying attention to the compliments, genuine compliments that other people give us. That's another way. To cultivate self-love and also love for other people, there are meditation practices that we can do. The one that I would like to recommend to you is an ancient practice that has its roots in the words of Buddha, supposedly. It's called metta or loving kindness meditation. Metta meditation helps us arrive at peace that is within our soul, peace with ourselves and peace with other people. How to practice this metta meditation, we need to choose phrases that express our deepest desires and wishes and are worthwhile. So I'm giving you some generic ones basically, and would be like, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may all things go well for me. So we start with ourselves and send those mettas to ourselves, and then we send the mettas to someone for whom we have a great deal of love and respect. And then we send it to a neutral person. And finally, we send it to a person that we are having a hard time liking. And over time, you need to give this meditation some time, I would say, to practice it about at least to 20 to 30 minutes a day, and give it 6 to 8 weeks. And you'll be amazed to see how your feelings towards that person, especially the last category, the one that you're struggling to like, change. Because when we have negative feelings for other people, a lot of times those people do not know anything about that. It's just us that we are suffering in silence. We can also do metta meditation in other occasions like waits and delays. For instance, when you're stuck in traffic, it's like 4 o'clock and you're a Mopac, and it's like parking lot and you're getting very impatient. So you look around and send metta to all the other people who are in the same boat with you. Or maybe, in a meeting that you're getting very impatient. So just send metta, and you will see, just look around and send metta to the people who are participating in that meeting, in your heart, of course, and your feelings will change. Another way that you can practice it is basically when you're driving, when somebody, for instance, cuts you off, and that would be a good time to send the metta, because it helps you overcome negative feelings such as anger and also fear. There's a lot of research on the subject of metta really changing the brain cells, even 10 minutes of that practice. According to the book that Bijan mentioned last time, How God Changes Your Brain, the neuroscientists teach us that even 10 minutes of metta meditation helps really with the growth of brain cells. So it's really potent meditation practice, metta. Now I want to move on to talking about a fundamental approach to living a happy life. The secrets of true happiness is the practice of the presence of God as a constant and loving companion. In other words, living a God-conscious life where God is the core. I have two passages here from the words of Baha'u'llah that Adib is going to help us read. Adib Jan, please.
So first we have this passage from Baha'u'llah in Gleanings. Those hearts that are aware of his presence are close to him and are to be regarded as having drawn nigh unto his throne. And then in the Gems of Divine Mysteries, he says, it behooveth the people of truth that they should walk upon the earth as though they were in the presence of God. Such must be their state, that their eyes should behold the evidences of his might, their tongues and hearts make mention of his name, their feet be set towards the lands of his nearness, and their hands take fast hold upon his precepts.
Thank you very much, Adib. Now, the practice of the presence of God also finds support in the life of the Bab. Adib, would you read the next parts also, please?
Sure. So in this story, Abdul Baha is advising the Baha'is to always turn to God in their daily activities. The passage is, His Holiness the Bab said, I worked in a commercial store at an early age. Whenever I had to write the address on a bale or read an address therefrom, I would lower my head and bow before God. In this way, I had God in my mind, even in this small task. My goal was God, and under all conditions, he was in my view. And then elsewhere in one of his tablets, Abul Baha says, and whilst thou art occupied with thy profession, thou canst remember the true one.
Thank you very much, Adib. So, what are the benefits of this practice of mindfulness of God as a constant and loving companion? I would say that for one thing, it helps us overcome fear and worry because we know we are not alone. God is with us. Here is a beautiful passage from Abdul Baha where he says, God is the companion and the comforter. Lonely is he who is unmindful of God, but if he be aware of God, he shall never be truly alone, though he be in the midst of a vast and arid desert, for God is ever with him. The practice of the presence of God leads to spiritual joy and serenity. In the book of Isaiah, we read, Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee. It leads to transformation in our thoughts, words, and deeds. So because you know you're in the presence of God, you're going to be more careful with the words that you say and with the actions and even with the thoughts. The thoughts pop into our head and we have no control over that. But what we do with the thoughts from that point on, of course, is totally up to us because one thought leads to another thought. Knowing that you're in the presence of God, we are more careful with allowing the thought to just, lead us to what we say or do. The practice of the presence of God is conducive to his protection and good pleasure. In the Quran, we read, Verily the noblest of you in the sight of God is one who is most deeply conscious of him. Behold, God is all-knowing, all-aware. Undoubtedly, the best book that I have read on the subject of the practice of the presence of God, a book that teaches us a great deal of techniques, is a book that is called The Practice of the Presence of God. You see the book cover there. It is really not the actual, he didn't really write the book. These are the words of a 17th century French monk by the name Brother Lawrence. His story is really a fascinating story. He was a soldier. He was wounded in a war. At the age of 18, he had a spiritual awakening, and because of that, he decided to dedicate his life to God. So he went and he joined a monastery and made a pact with himself and with God that he's going to spend the rest of his life in the presence of God, that his life would be a life of continual conversation with God. And of course, it was not easy. It took him 10 years. And he went through severe tests. At some point, he thought that his life was a life of sin. He came to that conclusion at some point during those 10 years. But eventually, he overcame. And he got to a point where he was in the presence of God for a good part of every day. And he became one of the happiest people of his time. From all parts of France, people would go to him, to this monastery, to meet this monk who was so happy and always rejoicing. Even the abbot of the monastery wanted to know the secret of his happiness. It is a book of techniques. The language is very simple, is very inspiring, is very engaging. I have read it at least 100 times, and every day I read a little bit of that. And he just moves you very much. I highly recommend this little book to you. You can find the entire book online. So here's a little passage from the practice of the presence of God that Adib is going to help us read. Adib John, please.
That we might accustom ourselves to a continual conversation with him, with freedom and in simplicity. That we need only to recognize God intimately present with us, to address ourselves to him every moment, that we may beg his assistance for knowing his will in things undoubtful, and for rightly performing those which we plainly see he requires of us, offering them to him before we do them, and giving him thanks when we have done. That in this conversation with God, we are also employed in praising, adoring, and loving him incessantly for his infinite goodness and perfection.
Thank you very much, Adib John. So the praising and adoration and loving, among other things that he talks about. Brother Lawrence says that we need to make the love of God the end of all our actions. The term that Baha'u'llah uses is lillah, that basically whatever you do it for God. This is one of my most favorite passages from Brother Lawrence. We're talking about God. He says, He is near you and with you. Leave Him not alone. You would think it rude to leave a friend alone who came to visit you. Why then must God be neglected? Do not then forget Him. Adore Him continually. But how do we practice the presence of God? It's not easy to stay in the presence of God all the time. Inspired by the words of Brother Lawrence, in our book, we developed a technique that we call the 4Gs daily practice. And the 4Gs stand for gratitude, guidance, gaze, and again, gratitude. So to give you one example, you want to make a phone call, you want to call your friend. So gratitude, you're grateful that you have that friend in your life. Guidance, you seek help from God to guide you in saying the right words, so that your words would be the kind of words that God is happy with, kind, loving words. Gaze, during the conversation, you try to see God present with you, and at the end, being grateful for the confirmations that you receive. So the 4Gs. Living your life like that, we believe that our actions gradually become little acts of communion with God. Baha'u'llah says, enter the heaven of communion with me. Imagine with every task, we enter the heaven of communion with the beloved. We can do this practice for an hour maybe, to make it practical, an hour a day. We can just do our best to stay in the presence of God, in the presence of God, with different tasks in the course of that 1 hour. Or maybe throughout the day with various tasks. Maybe we decide 4 things that I do today. I'm going to stay in the presence of God and just maybe seek guidance and be grateful and all the things that we talked about. I believe that having a reward system always helps. So maybe when you succeed in doing this practice, maybe your goal was to stay in the presence of God for 1 hour and you actually managed to do that. So you can reward yourself by making a donation to a charity of your choice, a cause that's very near and dear to your heart. And maybe you even want to make that donation in the name of a deceased person, someone that you lost that's very dear to you, a family member or a friend. The way I look at it is a win-win situation. By doing this practice, of course, you learn to stay in the presence of God, the most wonderful way that we can live our lives. And also with just that contribution helps with the growth of the soul of the deceased. So this is a beautiful passage from Abdul Baha, where he talks about charitable donations in the name of the deceased. That is even more important than just praying for them, because other people will benefit from it as well. Adib John, would you read that, please?
Of course. As to goodly deeds and charitable donations, these will certainly diminish the misdeeds of the departed and add to their good works, for others will benefit from those generous acts. It would be as if the deceased had sought forgiveness for themselves, and as the benefit thereof is obvious, it is better and more important to perform goodly deeds and make charitable donations.
Thank you very much. So talking about the secrets of true happiness, we talked about the practice of the presence of God. Building a strong faith is also very important in living a happy life. Faith is very important during the tests and trials of life. And of course, not everyone is born within a faith tradition, and it's, sometimes we really need to work hard to cultivate faith within us. But how do we do that? Again, living in the presence of God will be one way. Helps us overcome fear and worry. Engaging in daily prayers praying so that we have unshakable faith during the tests and trials of life. It's important. Deep contemplation on faith verses. Last time we talked about the cyber temple as a place where you can go and find passages from different faith traditions on different subjects. So there is a place for faith also. If you go there, you can find passages from all different religions. Repeating a faith verse in the morning and at bedtime is a wonderful practice. If you've never done that, an entire family can practice this together. So, for instance, if the faith verse for that 1 week is "Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee." In the book of Isaiah, we read that. Imagine starting your day with that, and at bedtime, just repeating that to yourself until you fall asleep. And little by little, this faith verse becomes a part of your subconscious mind. And when you are in the middle of a test and you get to a point that you don't know where to go and what to do, then that faith verse speaks to you. You hear the voice of God telling you, "Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee and I will help thee." So it's a beautiful practice. If you have never done that, I highly recommend it to you. Keeping a faith journal is also a wonderful practice. I wanted to show you my faith journal here. And actually, I've been doing this for almost 10 years. Bijan and Nadib also keep their own faith journals. So when God answers a prayer, then you can write about that in your faith journal, put the date and write about how that prayer was answered. And one of the wonderful things about the faith journal is when God gives you a new test, and of course, when we are in the middle of test, we don't know when that's going to be over or if it's going to ever be over, then we can open your faith journal and read all the examples in which God answered all those other prayers. So you know that he's going to come to your help and answer your prayers, and the test is going to be over. Holding a weekly faith night is also a good practice. Getting together with the family members and reading inspiring stories on basically cultivating faith and also deepening on their faith verses that night is a good practice. In a book called The Spiritual Design of Creation by Dr. Khushida Motlaq, it's a great psychologist, but I highly recommend this book to you. The author talks about 4 levels of faith and trust in God. The first one is the level of absolute unawareness, where God doesn't really play any role in one's life. Then there is a level of mental awareness. God is in the back of one's mind, has only marginal influence on one's feelings or one's daily life. And there is the level of perceptual awareness. God has moderate influence on one's feelings or daily life. And then finally is the level of absolute inner awareness, where God is at the core of one's life. What we've been talking about, the practice of the presence of God. And Dr. Motlaq says that that level, basically, that practice leads to true joy and inner peace. And he says that should be the ultimate goal of every human being. That is the life that brings us happiness. Among the fruits of living that kind of life, inner awareness, according to Dr. Motlaq, it says a sense of security, inner peace, meaning and purpose, a healthy and humble level of self-esteem, basic values to live by, a diminished fear of death, a sense of accountability, and a desire to pursue a noble life, a healthy attitude toward adversity, a sense of fellowship with people and the entire universe, a lingering sense of gratitude, and finally, an undying hope for the future. To be happy, we need to make prayer a habit. There's a beautiful quote from William James, a great psychologist and philosopher, where it says, "The sovereign cure for worry is prayer." So when God gives us a new test, why would we worry when we can pray and leave all in God's hands so that he will guide us to the right path? So prayer can be of great help during the times of tests and trials, illness, grief, hopelessness, and loss. But how should we pray? What are the ways that we can pray? There are supplication prayers. Norman Vincent Peale calls them gimme, gimme, gimme prayers when we want things from God. There's nothing wrong with that, of course. There is the praise and adoration prayers and gratitude. What should we pray for? To give you some ideas, pray to attain to our life's purpose. So he put us here on earth, and there is a purpose for our life, and then we pray so that he will guide us to the path that he has chosen for us, his will in this life for us. Pray to have unshakable faith no matter how bad life becomes, that we are not shaken by the tests. Pray for those that we do not like. It softens our hearts. So that is really a wonderful practice. Pray for strength. Pray for guidance in our daily activities. Pray for protection from tests and trials of life is very important. Pray to be protected from our own lower nature. It's also important to pray for protection from the other people's lower nature, because sometimes they tempt us. And so we need to pray for that, to be protected from theirs. How should we pray? So ask for what you want, but be ready to accept what God gives you. Here's what Abdul Baha says: whatever we ask for, which is in accord with divine wisdom, God will answer. In his mercy, he answers the prayers of all his servants, when according to his supreme wisdom, it is necessary. Sometimes the answer to a prayer is no, but in reality, it is a blessing. Some of God's greatest gifts are unanswered prayers, so it could be a blessing in disguise. Here's what Baha'u'llah says, hidden words: my calamity is my providence. Outwardly, it is fire and vengeance, but inwardly, it is light and mercy. And a lot of times, the answer is wait. We have to wait for his time. When we pray, God hears more than we say, answers more than we ask, gives more than we imagine, but in his own time and in his own way. Here's a beautiful quote from the words of Baha'u'llah, where he says, incalculable is the grace of God, and limitless is his bounty. He had answered and will continue to answer the needs of all his servants. That there is at times a delay in his answer is for the benefit of that person. Indeed, better will be the answer he shall receive than that which he had desired. Another secret to true happiness would be service. Service is a powerful way to lasting happiness. Here's what Baha'u'llah says on service. He says, that one indeed is a man, true human being, who today dedicated himself to the service of the entire human race. In the Bible, we read, each of you should use whatever gift you have been given. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others. So the gifts that God has given us, we need to use them in the service to his cause. Abdul Baha says, the noblest of men is he who serves humankind. The glory and majesty of man are dependent upon his servitude to his fellow creatures. A good example of service, of course, is Dr. Albert Schweitzer, great philosopher, theologian, and physician who spent more than half a century serving in Africa. Here's what he says on the subject of service. He says, one thing I know, the only ones among you who will be really happy are those who will have sought and found how to serve. In a book called The Healing Power of Doing Good, the author Alan Lux talks about helper's high. This is a term that actually he has coined It's a beautiful book. I highly recommend it to you. And he says that when you do good, your brain releases endorphins, which is basically body's natural painkiller, and you feel good. That's how your body rewards you. And the book is full of many stories of people, even with chronic pain, that when they did volunteer work, as long as they were doing that work, the pain just disappeared. So as far as the benefits of volunteering and service, we can talk about spiritual benefits of volunteering, which basically it helps with our self-confidence. We feel needed and valued by the people that we help. Dr. Levin, who's a professor at Yale University, says, when you're a helper, your self-concept improves. You're somebody, you're worthwhile, and there is nothing more exhilarating than that. There's a beautiful quote by Henry Drummond. He says, you will find as you look back upon your life that the moments when you have really lived are the moments when you have done things in the spirit of love. Talking about the spiritual benefits of volunteering, we can say it can help us connect to other people. It gives us a sense of peace through joy, enthusiasm, optimism, and fulfillment. As far as the physical and psychological benefits of volunteering, you can say it enhances our immune system. It can alleviate pain, headaches, backache, helps with overcoming insomnia, acid stomach, arthritis, lupus, asthma, heart disease, and definitely depression. There is a story of Barbara Bush, the former First Lady, that when she came back after a 2-year stay in China with her husband in 1976, she suffered severe depression, and eventually she defeated her depression permanently by doing volunteer work for only 6 months. How do we cultivate an attitude of service? Here are some ideas. By contemplation of the sacred texts. Again, the Cyber Temple is a place that you can go to. Prayer to be guided. Choose an area of our lives based on our talents and skills and interests. And of course, to give anonymously would be one way also. Now, before I have Adib read this story for us, I just wanted to let you know that The Secrets of True Happiness has its own fan page now, and where every week we post inspiring stories and quotes and even videos. For those of you who are interested, Adib is gonna share the link. Adib Jan, if you don't mind doing that, and then please read that story for us. It's a beautiful story from a book called Essentials of Spirituality by Dr. Roger Walsh, a great psychiatrist, theologian, and philosopher.
A friend of mine had a delightful experience of helper's high and a potent lesson in the power of anonymous giving when he was on a spiritual retreat. The food at the retreat was rather sparse and plain, so when he received a cake in the mail, he was ecstatic. However, after eating a piece, he began to think of the other people at the retreat, all of whom would enjoy a treat just as much as he would. After a moment's hesitation, he went into the kitchen and placed a piece of cake in each person's bowl. Then he hid and watched the expressions of astonishment and delight as each person filed into the kitchen and found not an empty bowl, but an unexpected delicacy. This happened 20 years ago, and he says that he can't recall the taste of the cake he ate himself, but he still remembers with delight the look on people's faces that day. He has had 20 years of enjoyment from one cake.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Adib. So, what is the secret of true happiness? Abdul Baha says man is in reality a spiritual being, and only when he lives in the spirit is he truly happy. So we would say that the secret of true happiness is to live a God-centered life with focus on love and service. Adi, would you read that for us, please?
Of course, how to cultivate an attitude of service. This is a passage from Abul Baha's Secret of Divine Civilization. Is there any deed in the world that would be nobler than service to the common good? Is there any greater blessing conceivable for a man than that he should become the cause of the education, the development, the prosperity, and honor of his fellow creatures? No, by the Lord God, the highest righteousness of all is for blessed souls to take hold of the hands of the helpless and deliver them out of their ignorance and abasement and poverty, and with pure motives and only for the sake of God, to arise and energetically devote themselves to the service of the masses, forgetting their own worldly advantage and working only to serve the general good.
Thank you very much, Adibjan. So I'm going to end my presentation with an inspiring video. And then after that, if there are any questions, Bijan is here and Adib. So we'll try to answer questions to the best of our ability. Here's the video.
เขาจะได้อะไรถ้าเขาทำแบบนี้ทุกวันเขาจะไม่ได้อะไรเลยไม่ได้รวยขึ้นไม่ได้ออกทีวีไม่มีใครรู้จักไม่ได้มีชื่อเสียงที่มากขึ้นเพราะสิ่งที่เขาได้คือได้แค่ความรู้สึกเห็นความสุขใจได้ความรักได้ในสิ่งที่เงินซื้อไม่ได้ได้โลกที่สวยงามกว่าเดิมในชีวิตคุณอะไรคือสิ่งที่คุณต้องการมากที่สุด
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing.
Quite well.
Wonderful. All right. So this is what we're going to do. We are going to open it up for questions. And since we didn't hear Bijan talk, he has to answer them all. No, I'm just kidding. But let's see. Here we go. Let me allow participants to unmute themselves. Okay. So are there any questions or comments that anyone had?
Can I ask a question?
Up here, how about if you raise your hand digitally? We'll go. All right, Eugene, we'll let you go first. Eugene, how's that?
Okay, thank you so much. Hello, guys. Thank you for this wonderful presentation, first of all. I'm very glad that Jale invited me for this 1 hour of, I don't know, it's a joy being here, really. I have a question about you mentioning metta, and I had an impression that you have something to do with Vipassana meditation. Would you please tell me your experience?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch what you said. Would you repeat your question?
Do you hear me well?
Would you repeat your question? I didn't quite catch.
Okay. You mentioned metta as the practice. And I have an impression that you have connection with the Vipassana or Vipassana meditation. It's a Buddhist practice. The metta is the next step, which is shared after people learn that practice and understand the meaning of observation. And that's what you mentioned. I have impression that you have connection with that. Would you please share your experience?
Well, thank you for your question. So the way I look at it is these are different approaches to meditation. They could be done separately. So there's a breath awareness meditation that could be the beginning to Vipassana, where you are aware of whatever is happening around you. And metta meditation by itself could be a meditation where you focus on cultivating love for yourself and for other people. Because the belief is that there is a wealth of love within everyone's soul. That's what Buddha taught. And by doing this on a daily basis, you can bring little by little, you can bring that love out of your heart and just, have it for yourself and for other people. And the whole goal of metta meditation is the whole concept of interconnectedness, that by doing this metta meditation, you feel your connection with other people in this world. To give you one example, I was teaching a class on meditation, and there was this lady in her 80s who took the meditation class, and out of all of the techniques, she really liked the metta meditation. And she practiced it for 8 weeks, and she took the class for a second time. And then she came up to me and said, Farnaz, this metta meditation completely changed my life. And I said, how come? She said, well, I live with my daughter and my son-in-law, and I absolutely hated my son-in-law. And but I practiced it for 8 weeks, and my feelings totally changed for him. So much so that even my daughter noticed and said, Mom, what is happening? So it is really a powerful meditation, because the way I look at it is just like it's like praying. Abdul Baha says to pray for everyone, to wish, sending prayers. You have it in all different traditions also. So when you wish well, for other people, that is, I think, how this meditation is so potent, because you want the best things for other people. I don't know if I answered your question or not. So.
You also mentioned about self-love, and which is also part of the metta meditation. You start from that. Your explanation was beautifully matching to that exact practice which I came across of. So you answered the question. Thank you so much. I just wanted to hear you saying this. Thank you.
You're quite welcome, Eugene. And as you mentioned, that self-love and emphasis on self here is very important. This has nothing to do with ego, of course, because a lot of times self-love is missing. We're so critical of ourselves. We see our flaws more than the good that's in us. And that is why in this metta meditation, we need to do this after, for instance, you start with yourself, and then you send the metta to the person for whom you have a lot of love and respect. Then you go back to yourself again, and then go back to the other people. And it's so interesting with a neutral person. So the third category, and I remember when I was doing that, I decided to choose someone who was helping me with my grocery at HEB when I shop. So I started just bringing the picture to my mind. I didn't know the name of that person, but then, having done this for 8 weeks, when I went shopping, I remember one day he wasn't, kind of, what happened to me? Because I felt connected to him. And also with the other thing, as far as, sending metta during the time that you feel, or you're about to get angry, I think that is a really potent practice. A lot of times I see students who do this with their driving draw a great deal of benefit from it. Again, sharing my own personal experience, I remember trying to get on Mopac and somebody cut me off, and I thought to myself, this is the time to practice metta meditation. So I started sending metta to that person. I still remember it was a blue BMW. And so my feelings changed for that person as I started saying, may you be happy and healthy and all things go well for you. It changed so much that if something happened to this guy, I wouldn't be happy. So it's a very, very powerful practice, the metta meditation. It is really a good practice for people who have racing minds, because I think contrary to like breath awareness meditation, we are just focusing on your breathing. Here you have a lot of things to do. It gives the mind so many different things to do. So it helps you be more focused on yourself and other people and the things that you are saying. So yes, indeed, it's a very powerful practice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Quite welcome.
Well, I have a comment. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay. I always wonder. Well, I know that, I think I've benefited specifically from, in the field of service, I noticed that on one of the slides, it says, take your talents, your skills, and put them into service. And I think for a long time, I tried to do things that I wasn't good at, and I would always end up frustrated. And so at some point in time, I kind of turned that and around and said, okay, what do I like doing? And so where can I serve? What can I do with the skills that I have? What do I like doing? And where can I serve? And I think that that's something that's very powerful, because if you get people serving in capacities that they're not really happy in, that they don't like, then I don't think that you progress in that area.
Indeed, that is how it needs to be. Just know what your strengths are, and then based on that, choose the area. And of course, prayers are always very important to be guided in doing what you need to do with your life. Well, thank you very much for your comment, Laura. Appreciate it.
So, Chris, this is Bijan. I just wanted to make a few observations and comments. First of all, since I see a lot of new faces for this second session, I have to explain that gibberish that they see behind me. And this is actually a hemistich from a famous Rumi poem, which in Persian it says, Har cheez ke dar justan ani, ani. In English, it roughly translates as whatever is your primary quest in life, that you will become. So think about that for a minute. If you are seeking God, as Bab and Baha'u'llah, for example, say, you will become divine and godly. If you are after material possessions, after power, after fame, any of those other things, whether you realize or not, you become that thing. You become the object of your desire. And so the choice is ours. And so having something like that in mind, I think it really helps with what Farnaz was talking about earlier about the purpose of life. The purpose of life is to know God, to love him, to worship, and to also to serve him by loving and serving his creatures. And so that was one thing that I wanted to mention. Regarding faith and the faith journal that Farnaz mentioned, I wanted to give you a personal example from my own life. After I graduated, I worked for the state of Texas for 5 years as an instructional designer. And that's, I think, around mid-90s, 1995, when multimedia and computer-based training was really taking off as a field. And I badly wanted to get into that area. And there was actually a wonderful opportunity, or at the time, I thought it was a wonderful opportunity at a different state agency for a computer-based training and multimedia specialist. And I prayed incessantly that I would get that job, because I thought that was going to be the ideal next step for me. And I didn't get it. And at the time, I thought, well, the answer to my prayers, I always thought that the answer was going to be yes and no. Sometimes it's no, sometimes it's wait. And within a few months, another opportunity opened up for me at AMD, Advanced Micro Devices. And that's where I've been for the past 25 years. And that job, the other job at the other state agency, the leader and the entire team were laid off after 2 months. After 2 months. And so this, I obviously recorded in my faith journal as one example of when the answer to a prayer or a series of prayer appears to be no. Well, at first it was no, because God was waiting for a better opportunity for me, and that opportunity was eventually granted. And so we need to be careful about when we pray, the answer is not always yes. Sometimes it's no, sometimes it's wait for God's time. And so we need to remember that. And then regarding service that Laura mentioned, yes, of course, God doesn't want miserable volunteers. He wants happy volunteers because that's the best way to serve, right? And when we think about America, often we think, oh, America is the most materialistic society in the world and people don't volunteer. That is not the case. In fact, in the book, if I can find the chapter on service, there are, there's a survey by Time Magazine conducted in December 2004, where they asked a large number of Americans what their happiness where it came from. 3 in 4 actually ranked contributing to the lives of others among the top 3 things that makes them happy. The 2 items that topped this were friends and friendship and relationship with children. Both of those also show the importance of social connectedness, generous behavior, and social support. So the more we get out of ourselves and serve others, the happier we are. And plenty of Americans are doing that. So that was just another observation. And then the last thing I wanted to say was about the importance of love. The good news is more and more people are noticing the connection, the potential connection between science and religion. A great example of that is the late Sir John Templeton. If you're into stock market and investing, you're familiar with the Templeton Mutual Fund. He was the founder of that mutual fund, but he was also among the most the best philanthropists around. And he actually established a research fund. Let me get to that section of the book where we talk about Sir John Templeton. If you don't know him, I highly recommend studying his life. So he actually created a foundation called the John Templeton Foundation, which currently gives about $70 million a year to research grants and programs that engage in spiritual and scientific projects. Why? because he wants to spread, this is now his legacy. He wanted to spread love in the world, as much of it as possible. And so he dedicated quite a bit of his life towards that, because he wanted to see if we could converge the same views of God, or the ultimate reality, as he called it, between science and religion. And that's in total harmony with what the Baha'i faith also teaches. And so part of that $70 million also goes to what he calls the Templeton Prize for Progress Toward Research or Discoveries about Spiritual Realities. Some of the recipients of that $1.5 million were Mother Teresa, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the famous Russian novelist, and also Paul Davies, the famous English physicist. So every year, that fund contributes $1.5 million towards any project that tries to prove that there are harmonies between science and religion. And so that's something to celebrate, I think, for all of us.
Could you please repeat the name of that fund?
It's called the Templeton Mutual Fund. I will put it in chat.
Please.
Sure.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Are there any other questions? You can type them in chat too if you don't feel like asking them on camera.
Chris, may I?
Please.
Hi. Thank you so much. This was so wonderful for me to listen to. I'm coming to you from Westchester in New York. I wanted to ask you about the youth. I find that a lot of the youth that I'm seeing are suffering from unhappiness, maybe more than my generation did. And I do work in a clinic where I see patients, and the youth that come to see me, they are on so many medications. It's incredible. I have not seen. I was wondering, I mean, with the society we're living in, it's so fast paced and they're bombarded by media. How do you approach, or how do you recommend a person like myself to approach a youth that's suffering in a short time that I get to see them?
So if I may answer that, and then Bijan and Adi, please help me with this. My experience with that is because the meditation classes I teach, a lot of times younger people take the class in their 20s who suffer from both anxiety and depression. What I would like to suggest at this point primarily is the gratitude journal. And that really, there's a lot of research on that it even up to 25% makes you happier. So encourage them to keep a gratitude journal, and also different meditation practices. Scientifically, we know that it helps with the brain completely changing. We know about the neuroplasticity of the brain. So if you could teach them some meditation techniques, and there are so many of them that you can just share with them. There's a mindfulness practice, the breath awareness. We talked about the metta, there is mantra. And so meditation definitely helps with overcoming depression. And gratitude journal, the happiness journal, I talked about it last time, to look back at your life and just record all the good experiences that you have. And then, from that point on, everything good that happens, right? And then when you go back and reread those examples, even 5 to 8 minutes a day on a daily basis, it changes the brain in the health, happiness. The scientists talk about that. I've done some research on that. So all of these journals, but maybe when they are ready, when the youth is ready, I would say the most potent of all practices of meditation, or the best way to happiness. Of course, the person needs to be ready, and it needs to be done gradually, is the practice of the presence of God. And I always end my lectures with that, because that is the ultimate way to happiness. to learn to live in the presence of God. God is all power, and His absolute power, and we are all weakness. So for us to learn that there is this loving God who created us out of love, and He wants only the best for us, to learn to stay in His presence. And I think by experience, little by little, it gets better. So if in one task, I can turn to God and ask for His help and for His guidance, and then at the end, you see that this is done really well, then you know that you were not alone in this task, that He actually did help you. Then maybe it's a good time to go and write in your faith journal. And that helps with the strengthening of the faith. So, even I say as easy as answering an email, you seek the grace of God. Baha'u'llah said, seek ye His grace, he that seeketh it treadeth His straight path. So He wants us to seek His grace in everything. Bardo Lawrence says that you glorify God in everything that you do. That's another way to seek guidance from God. And little by little, the whole life becomes a collection of little acts of communion. Imagine, in every task that you do, even as easy, as simple as writing an email, it is what Baha'u'llah says, enter the heaven of communion with me. Even in writing an email, you're entering the heaven of communion with Baha'u'llah. So you say, God, please help me. I don't know what to write here. You inspire my soul. And of course, you go to the computer, you're grateful. Gratitude is always very important. The fact that I have this computer, the fact that I could get out of my bed to sit here, that you gave me strength to do it, the things that we take for granted so much. That's why I think gratitude needs to become a way of life with everything that we do. So, coming here to sit behind the computer, to have the computer, to have a person to write the email to, and then having all that gratitude, then you move on to guidance. So guide me, tell me what to do, what to write, because if you don't help me, then whatever I write may come from my lower nature and no good. And then as you are doing this again, continue seeking His grace. So God needs to become a core, as we talked about with Khurshid Ahmad's book. It needs to be the essence of one's life, the practice of the presence of God. But we need to be careful when we introduce that concept. In the meditation classes, I talk about the practice of the presence of God as a part of my very last lecture. Unfortunately, nowadays, people don't want to hear about God. So you talk about other things, you talk about gratitude journal and things of that nature. I had a student who was telling me, why would I want to be grateful to God? Whatever I have, I did it myself. They don't even want to acknowledge that, without God, you're nothing. And we are nothing without Him. So having done all of that, then gradually, and I think the best way to develop that relationship with God is the actual words of God Himself. So that's why contemplation is so important, because the words of God have transforming power. You read a verse from God, you try to understand it, and maybe you take that verse with you throughout the day and you rethink it, you just think about it over and over again, and you end the day again with that verse until it becomes a part of your subconscious. And then your life becomes a collection of the words of God and in the presence of God. Hope I answered your question. I'm sorry, Bijan, please help me.
Yes, dear Shahrzad, I don't know if you were here last week for the last session, but what I can add is to reinforce what I said last time. The good news is, even if they don't believe in God and prayer, and they are science and rationality oriented, there is now more and more scientific evidence for basically what religion has been teaching. And last time I mentioned two books from a neuroscientist by the name of Andrew Newberg. One was Why God Won't Go Away, and Adib could put those in the chat again, Why God Won't Go Away. And the other one is how can God change, how God changes your brain, how God changes your brain. And so this wonderful neuroscientist with his colleagues conducted a series of studies of Christian nuns and Buddhist monks over many years. And he essentially, he and his colleagues came to the conclusion that we are hardwired as human beings, we are hardwired to seek God. And we are happiest when we feel connected to God. And that essentially reinforces what, for example, Baha'u'llah says in his writings, that ye have been created to know God and to worship him and to show love and kindness towards others. So if we want happiness for ourselves, it's by moving towards God, praying for the good of others, and then by doing well and doing good to doing good to others, not only we benefit, but humanity benefits, and society moves towards an ever advancing civilization. So everybody benefits if we try to develop virtues and capacities that our souls have been invested with.
Thank you to you.
Sure.
Well, thank you so much. It is 12:10. So I was going to invite people to I'm going to stop the live stream, and we're going to have the after party on Zoom so we can hang out and chat, and we'll see if